That's what we do. Hit record there. We do that. This is already recording. Hi everyone, and welcome to this very science-y edition of the Remain Indoors podcast. We're also going to complain about DIY, house prices, and just generally yell at clouds, all while remaining indoors. I'm joined on this journey by a futuristic cyborg that only spanners can see or hear. It's Matt Trumpets. Oh, I can't believe I stuttered on my Quantum Leap reference. Darn, ruined it.
Well,
I'll edit it to sound like I nailed it. How's it going, Matt Trumpets? I know we've got a few workmen in the background that we've got to dodge. There might be the odd drill going off.
yeah. Well, I was desperately trying to get in, and there's an interlude of peace and quiet and solitude next door, and I was just like, quick, let me jump in and say my thing. But you yourself have referenced my ceiling is not fixed.
No.
We're still living in our dining room. That's very exciting. Tragic news on the calculus front.
Oh, why do you do this to upset me? You know I don't like you talking about your calculus every single time.
Well, the daughter got an 88 on her last test. She got a 92 on the first one. She got an 88 on the last test, and she was beside herself.
And how much credit did you take? Did you say you would have been nothing without my constant calculus help?
No, that was absolutely not the case.
Oh.
It's just the fact that, it becomes a very big focal point when you're all locked in the same place at the same time, always.
Yeah, no, I get that. We're currently preparing my son to take the 11 plus, which is you wouldn't have heard of that, but it basically determines if you can get into like a selective secondary school.
Yeah. This sounds similar to what we had to do both for her middle school and her high school. They were audition processes and highly selective. So good luck. It's a bit stressy on the kids, I will say.
Well, I'll tell you who will know more about that, and it's our special guest today. It's science man, Dr. Andrew Holding. Thank you for intelligenting up the shed today, Dr. Holding.
Happy to be here.
Oh, thanks. We've got tons to talk about today because, this week we've just been back and forth like two angry middle-aged dads, but that's exactly what we are. Yeah, but we've gone back and forth on quite a few topics. So what we'll do, I think we'll start on a bit of like COVID-y stuff, onto supercomputers, and then we'll kind of earn our general dad rants by paying some science first. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
You've got kids of a similar-ish age to me, so we are sending our kid for the 11 plus. I think yours are a tad younger, but you're obviously familiar with the system. And like, if you pass the 11 plus, you generally then get to go to something called a grammar school, which is an all-boys school. But we figure it would generally just look good on his educational profile should he do well at that.
So we don't, because obviously grammar schools are only in very small areas of the UK anymore. So there are none where we are.
Well, there are none where we are. There are none where we are, but we said to them, we might be moving to that area. Could we take it anyway? And they said yes.
Oh, yes, no, you can do 11 plus ahead of time. So we're doing the other option, which is you buy a house in the catchment of a good school.
Yeah.
Which is why I've been ranting about house prices, which I know is a different discussion.
Right.
We'll come back
we'll come back to that. That's perfect then, Dr. Holding.
But it's entirely related, and this is fundamentally why I've been so grumpy about these things. It shouldn't be like this, should it? It should be everyone should have an equal opportunity for education. It shouldn't be done on your postcode. It shouldn't be done on a test you do when you're 11 and you stress your kids out. It's just not fair. And as you say, why do some areas get to keep their grammar schools that other places got rid of them? And all the evidence is grammar schools help a small number of people. So your son will do well, and then all the other kids end up their education is reduced because by sucking that diversity out of the population, it drops everyone else. And that's not good either. You want the average population to do as well as they can. You don't just want a small number to do better than everyone else.
Yeah. Well, yeah, look, we'll come back to that because my two apps that I've got open are a school checker app and Rightmove at the moment. And every time we find a house that looks like it's a nice area, we go, but look, it's by the sea and this is wonderful. And like the one school is like, red, this school has car fires every single day. Your child will die in a car fire if you go to this school. But let me just start by I was going to take kind of the temperature of everyone. So we've taken Dr. Holding's temperature and he's registering at slightly furious degrees centigrade. Matt, I know, has just been fuming and fuming after his roof collapsed in his bedroom, which is just a complete nightmare. So all of you are, and when you're already in an apartment in a city where rental prices tend to lend to small rooms, and one of those rooms is completely out of commission, like that's a nightmare. So you're not registering too cool either, Mr. Trumpets.
No, and it's funny you're talking about the housing market. We're having the opposite problem because of the Rona. Rental prices are actually dropping in Manhattan. Really? So we're looking around and going, geez, maybe we could save some money if we move, but we don't really want to move. If I'm being honest, it's just such a hassle.
Well, it is, but you could move to somewhere that has a roof. That would be an option.
Yeah, it is. But then there's also the child to negotiate with. And I will tell you, as they get older, yes, they get better at negotiating.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you there. I'll be honest with you, I've had a real funny week. Like the 2 weeks before that, I've been so motivated. I've been pushing forward. Like, Matt, you know how much I've been getting out there and like networking, trying to make all the various projects like push everything to the next level, doing a lot of planning for March. When we could be starting to awaken into a COVID-free world. We'll ask Dr. Holding about that in a second. But certainly, like, even looking towards the start of the next F1 season already. So, like, we're making all our plans for, like, the 21-22 year. And that has been just, like, a 24-hour day job. Woke up on Monday morning, Matt, and I don't know if you ever get this. I woke up on Monday morning. I had no fight. I had no emotional energy. I felt physically drained, but mostly I had nothing in the tank to give. And I sort of just gave up a bit on Monday. And I was like, okay, it's Monday. I always have a heavy weekend of like work and broadcasting and stuff. And it always like drains me. So that's okay. Monday's fine. Tuesday wasn't a great deal better either. I was just like a potato, occasionally scrolling through my phone, trying to be productive. Wednesday, after the school run, I just went back to bed. And my wife just woke me up at like 11:30 with mussels and frites and some of those little Chinese like prawn things in breadcrumbs. Feeling a bit more motivated now. Today I've gone for a run. I'm fine and happy, but I just had 3 days of just being useless.
Mussels and frites. I thought, oh my God, your wife dragged some fitness trainers into the house to get you out of bed.
Hi, I am Fritz. I have been helping your wife out in many ways, and now it's time for you to join us. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, all I got to say is welcome to the other side of 40, my friend.
Yeah. So Fritz, no little chips, little skinny chips. I was trying to be international, but that's one of our little favorite when we want to treat ourselves, a bag of mussels, which is only like a couple of quid. But yeah, she laid all that on and she's just done her great cheerleader job of going, no, it's okay to be completely useless occasionally. It's fine. And in my defense, we've been working hard and I don't have traditional weekends. So, but I just had to admit to her, this is the worst bit. She has been on it. We're decorating the house just to a minimal standard so that it looks worthy to sell. She's been doing more of the school run. She's been on it around the house and she's got her own work schedule and been working hard as well. And I just had to look at her because we're really competitive. You know how we've got a really super healthy relationship and we like point score over everything. I admitted to her, look, I feel real bad. Like, you are just doing so much more than me. And she just went, I always do. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, oh, all right. I thought I was like handing an olive branch of just going, I appreciate your effort. I was like, all right, then, even more so than normal. But yeah, she's like, no, I always do more anyway. So I'm fine with that. But I don't know. You don't always have to be a bubble of positivity, do you guys? Sometimes you can just go, oh, I was a bit crap this week.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's reasonable, but for me, and what's funny is you're like, oh, basically what I hear, words out of your mouth. Oh, gee, it would be hard to be a musician because you work all weekend and you're at weird hours, and then you still have to deal with all the regular family stuff and everything else. So yeah, like I feel that, but I always liked it that my work would come in waves, and I would be super busy, just like 3 hours, 4 hours sleep for a couple of weeks, and then you'd have like this sort of dry spell where you had just nothing going on and you could sort of recharge the old batteries. I always kind of preferred that to your sort of steady drip of 9 to 5 kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting. In my 9 to 5 job, if I had a low, I could be a passenger for a little while. It feels like in that kind of 9 to 5 job, you can be a passenger and it kind of fade away. But what I found doing like content creation or even any kind of freelance stuff is there's just that little bit of like personal pressure to keep your foot on the gas. And if you don't watch out for it, you end up just not having any time off. So I'm still relatively new to all that. And my wife, who's been doing this forever, tries to help guide me through it. But yeah, certainly not used to some of the emotional energy just being drained away. All right. Speaking of energy, why don't we go to energy being applied in the world of supercomputers? Some genuine science news, Dr. Holding, that you actually gave to us. You popped in my inbox last time you came on, but I think we probably got distracted talking about cats or slippers or something like that. What's going on in...
So you're going to ask me...
Yeah.
You're going to ask me to remember this supercomputer that modelled the birth of the universe and everything off the top of my head, aren't you?
Hang on, I thought it was the one that ran at room temperature was the one that you sent me.
Okay, sorry, there's two, because you mentioned... So this is a superconductor, not supercomputer.
Oh, right, okay. Oh, no.
But we're happy... We'll just switch and you can edit that out.
No,
basically they're the same.
So, yeah, the high temperature superconductor. Now, this is fantastic and different from the other topic. So superconductors are these things... Oh, my headphones went out. Get rid of that. So superconductors are these things that have zero resistance. So they're really, really useful. But if you want to do electrical cables, one of the issues is you lose some of your power as heat because it has resistance. In certain quirky situations, resistance disappears. So what this used to require was like putting them in really cold liquids, maybe liquid nitrogen, maybe even colder. And what this paper showed is if they use this quite simple carbon hydrogen material, so basically sooty stuff, and squeezed it really, really hard, and we mean like pushing as hard as going to the center of Jupiter, they can make it be superconducting, but at room temperature. Whoa. And that's really amazing because that means you don't need to keep it cool. You just make this stuff. Okay, there's an issue with how much you have to squeeze it, but then you wouldn't have any resistance. And this means all these sci-fi ideas we've had for years about what you could do with superconductors at room temperature suddenly become possible.
Well, doesn't it take a lot of effort to keep something, or is it once you squeeze it, it stays squeezed?
So it does. And at the moment, what we're saying is even if they squeeze it and sort of back off a bit and get these things to work, it kind of loses its ability over time. But they're the first people to have done this. So that's amazing and that's brilliant. Of course, there's a load of other steps and other people have to keep pushing it forward. But, keeping something cool is possibly harder, probably a lot harder than keeping something squished.
Okay.
And, where superconductors have been quite useful is in space and satellites. Obviously, it's a bit colder, so you can use them maybe there and can have inventions up there doing. But really, it's just opening all these doors to these technologies we haven't even thought about. And if we have these, then, it opens up a whole new wealth of technology and opportunities. And, these are exciting things. These sort of step forward leaps in science open up a load of doors that no one ever considered. And I don't know if you've ever seen some of the cool things you can do with superconductors, but one of the famous one is if you get a magnetic track and you put a superconductor on it, because of the way they interact with magnetic fields, it hovers there. It doesn't need any power, and it literally sort of reflects the magnetic field back, so it holds on really nicely. And you can find these on YouTube. You push it, and it will just keep going around the track forever. No resistance because there's nearly no friction except for the air resistance, and it will just keep going around. And it's a beautiful demo. The problem with those is if it heats up, it falls off the track. And of course, liquid nitrogen is quite cold, so it heats up quite quickly.
So I would guess one of the most important and interesting things potentially about this would be the amount of energy you're going to save on cooling. So it might have some pretty big climate implications over the long term if it could be made more of an everyday technology.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. If you think how much power is lost in the national grid just trying to get it from A to B because of resistance, it could have opportunities there. Even then, people have talked about using liquid-cooled superconductors to do that. And it's always going to be when it passes a certain point, the cost of just heating up the atmosphere slightly versus, actually spending the money on infrastructure and all that, there'll be a break-even point. And of course, I don't know where that is, but at some point it will happen. And we've seen that with like electric cars. Political pressure, technology, and everything's come together to a point where people said, actually, you know what, I will buy an electric car. And I'm seeing more and more adverts for them, which means that people are taking it more and more seriously.
Will this? Yeah. Sorry, mate. Will this help with the internet? Because at the moment, like I suppose fiber is lossless at the moment, anyway, isn't it? Fiber optics. But it's always been annoying that, like, in the olden days, I used to look for where the exchange was in a town if I was going to rent somewhere, and I never wanted to be like a kilometer away from the exchange because you'd lose all that resistance from the copper.
Yeah, so I mean, it's related to that, but fiber obviously gives you this great thing that light travels around fiber really, really well. You do get loss of light. That's why on the fibers under the ocean, they have these boxes that pick up the signal and repeat it, and that causes a slight delay. But we're currently going across the Atlantic, and it works for the most part. Go on, Matt.
Which is why we should indeed use lasers for everything.
But lasers can't transfer power very well. So that's where we want superconductors. You don't want to be firing a laser through air or through down a fiber optics. Fiber optics just don't really carry power. They can do a bit, and I'm sure someone can find an example where it's worked really, really well. But you'll notice one of the key differences is if you have a fiber connection to something, it will always need its own power source. Where if you have like a USB connection to something, it won't necessarily, because it can carry power down the USB lead.
So I know you mentioned power distribution. Does this help us with things like renewables? Because it means you can better transfer things from one place to another. We're less vulnerable to the wind dropping in Skegness and being really high in the Hebrides.
I mean, yeah. So you would get rid of those losses in the grid. You can also, and probably, I mean, because I'm very hypothetical at this moment because someone's made a little millimeter square of his stuff crushed between two diamonds.
I know.
But it has implications on how well you can make generators in a wind turbine, because suddenly you can remove the resistance from that. You can, all of these things it improves. You can actually store energy in a superconductor, and it will just sit there forever because it will just go round and round and round because it's got no resistance. So you can make really cool sort of energy storage devices, presuming we can crack this problem that at the moment you need these ridiculously high pressures. But it's a breakthrough.
Can we compare this to other breakthroughs in that, like there will have come a point where somebody will have been able to make a wire glow in a glass case, and then the Dr. Holding of the time would have gone, in the future our entire streets will be lined with these glowing, I call them metal glow pops. And then he thought that they were going to be called metal glow pops, and but then the application of that and into street lamps and everything, probably took decades and decades. What do we reckon? What do we reckon here? Like, is this the kind of thing where you go, they prove the principle, and in 10 to 15 years' time, man, this is going to be amazing?
I mean, I'm sure there are other great examples where people have had this invention and think this is going to revolutionize everything, and it hasn't happened. I mean, an example from my own field is, you may have heard of CRISPR as this great gene editing tool.
Yeah.
Before it, there were TALENs, which not all of you go, what? They were another idea. They didn't have the same success as CRISPR.
Can you, while we're on CRISPR, because I think we've done the superconductor, I hear this CRISPR thing all the time, and you've just dropped in the phrase gene editing. Does it mean it can edit my genes? Can I get just a slightly longer femur, the thigh bones? I reckon a couple of inches there. Because I think my body's normal proportions. It's just my little legs that are short. So like a couple of inches there, the top one, a couple of inches into the shins. Can CRISPR do that?
So in theory, the CRISPR technology allows you to edit genes. The trouble is, it works really well in my lab on a set of cells where I try and edit all of them. A few of them are edited. I then select those cells and then grow those out, because I'm working with cancer cells that grow really nicely on a piece of plastic. The trouble with you is we can't like get a few cells edited and then regrow your leg. We just don't have the technology to do that.
You seem
so we'd
very
have to
sure.
somehow edit all the cells in your leg. And then, of course, your cells in your leg, because they're not cancerous, have mostly decided that they've given up on growing, because, you reached that age quite a while ago. We all did.
Yeah, 13 for me.
And that's really, really important for staying healthy. So we could possibly edit genes, but we'd probably randomly edit them. And that would be really bad.
Well, I mean, the obvious answer is to take one of his adult stem cells, grow him an entirely new set of legs, and then just simply replace the old legs with surgery.
So simple. Why can't we just do that?
And you wouldn't get rejection. So the issue is, how do you grow a whole leg in a vat? And we don't currently know how to do that. We could grow a whole new spanners by cloning you, in theory.
No, that won't be me.
It would take a while to do. It would take the same time, and it would have its own personality and brain, which would then have to murder. So ethically, it's not a good option.
I too think one spanners is probably about all the Earth can handle.
Hey, wow. These don't sound like good options, and definitely my legs gave up growing. I think when's year 7 and 8? How old are you there? 11, 12. I think that's when they stopped.
So there is a sensible use of this, though. So you're talking about obviously growing legs. Cystic fibrosis is a disease which causes problems with the lungs, and you have a shorter life expectancy. That's due to a gene that's wrong involved in the mucus production in the lungs, and we know exactly what happens. It's always roughly the same mutation because it's kind of like a weak point in the genome that's just slightly prone to going wrong. We could fix that without correcting every gene in the lung, every cell in the lungs. So if we only get like half of them, that means half of them are producing the right sort of surface in the lungs, and then you'll be less likely to get all the infections that come with cystic fibrosis. So we have got gene therapy options. The question at the moment is, how do you deliver it? How do you get it to enough cells? How do you make sure you don't mutate other genes at the same time? But yeah, I'm sure CRISPR or other technologies like CRISPR, because actually we don't necessarily need to gene edit, we can just add another gene in where there's different technologies for that. We can actually maybe start to make headway on these things. But people have been working on cystic fibrosis genetic cures for absolutely years, and it's been very, very challenging. And that's because, idea to actual medical technology is a long road.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a hard no on the longer legs, essentially.
I mean, you'll probably be dead before it happens, but we can hope. We can get you robotic legs. You might be able to do that.
Do you know what? I would be completely happy. Because Matt, I mean, you're a bit closer to the end of your natural life than we are, so more of a question for you, really. I would be perfectly happy with a mostly robot body for, like, it's okay, you have your biological life, and like, oh yeah, I did miss having all the squidgy bits, but I am more than happy to have a robot body for a few hundred years with, like, just a gently rotting brain on the inside. Like, I'm down for that.
I would say that there's a couple of pieces that I'd like to keep organic, but beyond that,
obviously
the invincibility of, they have now the robotic exoskeletons that they use in the warehouses, and they're like, oh yeah, pick up 250, 300 pounds, like 100, 150 kilos. No worries. You just bend over, pick it up, and walk off. They have it's almost like that scene from Aliens, at the end where she gets into the thing. Like, that's a real thing now.
Yeah.
And they're actually, I think, using derivations of that to help people walk better who have issues walking and stuff like that. So we're actually at a really cool and interesting point with the interoperability of robotics and people right now.
Yeah, but even your, like, flesh that you're keeping in that little, your little alien jumpy mech thing, that's gonna rot away eventually. It's gonna atrophy, if anything. And I know you were strongly implying that you'd want to keep hold of your twiddle wizard, your wizard stick, your staff there. That is what you were insinuating. Eventually you're going to get over that. You're going to be bored of that eventually, aren't you? When you've been alive for 300 years, you go, okay, you can carry on. You messed that up in general. So someone asked, are we going to be talking COVID, Andrew Storm? Yes, a little bit. All right, so a little bit of thank you for all that sciencey stuff, Dr. Holding. Like, I could let that drift on and on forever because I love absorbing that knowledge. And what I always find with those science chats is it gives me so many more questions that I now want to go and answer. And I want to remind myself of, like, resistance and how much you, like, lose over a certain amount. So, like, a normal kind of extension lead, 4-bar extension, you'll have like 7 ohms of resistance there. You run out a 10-meter cable and you're looking at, well, 10 times that. And it's really interesting how quickly you suddenly start having losses and stuff. So my head's full of all of that now. But yeah, I do want to talk COVID. Now, I did a tweet on the Twitters earlier about something that happened to me. And I think this is interesting from, a person point of view. Before we had any kind of social media following, not that we've got a massive one now, but before my social media would be read by anyone, I used to be quite ranty. I'd go on Facebook and go, "Whoa, this thing happened. Can you believe the politician did the thing?" And I try not to do that now. I try to be quite positive on my social media. But this thing happened to me today, and I ended up like with Trump syndrome, where I was like, "Wow, what do I have available to vent on? Oh, my phone. I'll vent on it." And now my Twitter account is quite a friendly place. My comments are normally quite a friendly place, actually, because I'm talking to people who are following me anyway. They're generally interested, and they click the like and go, okay, I agree or disagree. It's normally quite nice. If I get like 10 to 20, 30 likes on a thing, you go, oh, that was quite a good post. That's lovely. The 2 times in the last couple of weeks, Matt, where I've gone full Donald Trump on my Twitter account and done a big ranty hot take thing, I have been rewarded with instant feedback and attention, almost as if Twitter like pushes and promotes those things. But, you know, not just Twitter as a platform, but Twitter as a society. The 2 times I've gone full melty meltdown, no, well, not melty meltdown, but ranty rant, it's got picked up. And then it's a completely different scenario because it's getting retweeted. It's not just your followers seeing it anymore. And you get a bunch of angry people in your mentions going, you're stupid. You don't know anything. And yeah, and you just go, And I have to like rethink now and go, it occupies a fair part of your day, just having strangers yell at you. So you just go, maybe I need a different outlet. I need to put the phone down.
Yeah, I think managing a high number of retweets, a high engagement number is an entirely different skill. I mean, I always go back to when my wife did the Wonder Woman tweet.
Yes, of course.
And it was like 75,000 likes.
Oh my God.
It was like, I mean, it was ridiculous numbers.
Yeah.
And she just eventually had to mute the whole thing. People would come in and tell her she didn't know what she was talking about when she has a terminal degree in the field.
Or they go,
and
prove
has been
it.
working at the highest level for 20 years now. And she was like, okay, yeah, I know that I've actually taught that class in college, but okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then eventually she's like, you know what? I don't want to deal with, I'm just going to mute it. But I think what you're talking about is interesting. I'm not sure it's just Twitter promoting it. I think you are tapping into, like as someone with a child who is going to school and the situation you described on Twitter, I mean, that taps into a lot of, you know, worry that we all have as parents, like, because you immediately put yourself in that situation. You're like, what would you do if my child's teacher behaved that way? And that's a very emotive concept, and people want to express how they feel about it. And so you created like a lightning rod for people's opinions with it.
And then when it gets to that point, and this is, you know, I'm not even talking like tens of thousands or anything. I'm talking about like several hundred interactions. But like, you know, last time I checked, it had like 50 retweets, which is enough to put a bunch of strangers in your DMs. And then the one where I ranted about the cyber is Fatima's next job in cyber, you know, that was even more again. So that's nothing on the scale of what your wife had. But once you start getting those retweets, you have to go, oh, okay, this isn't personal anymore. This is the internet yelling at the internet. Actually, this one's not a particularly good example because it was generally nice. But here's what happened. My wife's on the phone. I walk in. She's just come off the phone to a relative. So these are people we know. These are very close relatives, people we know and we trust. And they're in the scenario where their child is getting upset because there's no social distancing going on at their school. People are climbing all over him. They're playing lots of like specific... Remember I told you at my son's school they were playing COVID tag, where they licked their hand and then they would go and try and touch each other. And you've got coronavirus. So that's kids in general. But yeah, here it was a bit extreme. There was no social distancing in the classroom, and they felt like the guidelines couldn't be followed. Obviously, people jump on and say, name and shame, tell me who the school is, or like, prove it. And I'm like, okay, whoa, I was just talking to my followers. I can't name and shame. My wife would punch me in my stupid face. She'd say, here, take this round head, and she'd continually punch me. So I was talking to the people who would generally just take my word for it that a thing is happening. That's fine. I understand the story doesn't stand up to scrutiny. They went into the school expecting to, you know, have a proper conversation about it, and they got told by their class teacher, "Look, the COVID, mate. It's all a big fuss about, you know, nothing. It's a load of rubbish." And he just went full like COVID denier. And the reason I tweeted it is because I'm getting angry. You know, where there was a story from our friend where an electrician refused to mask up as a contractor coming into their house, and I just feel like we need to start talking about COVID denial and COVID deniers and people who are actively suppressing all the efforts we're going through to try and contain coronavirus. So then I passed that on in the tweet. But yeah, they were told basically you don't need to worry about any of this social distancing, these guidelines, because it's all a load of rubbish. So he was just trying to suppress it. Now the parents involved, they're not big ranty people. They're not like, hey, in your face, stupid person. They were just like, oh right, okay, and just walked away feeling a bit kind of dejected and stupid. So that's the situation I found myself, Dr. Holding. We were chatting on here before the schools opened. The one thing I asked, I accepted at face value all the advice we were told, saying that children are fine going in there. So I didn't feel for my child's safety, but I genuinely feared for the spreading. And I said it seemed entirely predictable to me that it's basically a bunch of mass gatherings around the country. The one thing I asked is, if we have an increase in coronavirus in line with what you would expect from opening schools, the one thing I asked was, we don't then turn around and go, oh, the schools had nothing to do with it. It was rugby, So that's where we're at that point now. We're at the point where, hospital admissions and cases are rising pretty much exactly when you would have expected if schools were conduits of coronavirus, unless I'm wrong. And I'm happy to hear I'm wrong.
I mean, the thing is, we're still learning the whole time,
Yeah.
aren't we? So we don't know for absolute sure. Kids do seem to have it in the population. They seem to be asymptomatic mostly, but this is a disease where we're finding out things like long COVID, symptoms which we don't understand. People don't seem to always have the same symptoms. They don't seem to always have the same outcomes, permanent effects. Well, we don't know if they're permanent yet because we haven't had long enough to find out, but long-lasting effects that are quite confusing.
Yeah.
And, maybe you don't see a problem in the schools, but how do we know they're not a vector from one parent to another? Some people argue they're not.
Okay.
I think the risk is low, but I do think schools need to, follow the guidance they've been given, because that guidance, all the guidance I've seen, seems to follow the science, which is sensible. I know that science often isn't common sense because it's often counterintuitive, but it is sensible to follow what's been given, because you read it and it's based on the evidence they've currently got. And what shocks me about the story you're telling me is, yeah, a form teacher can be a denialist, but why is the head supporting that? And why are the government?
We don't know that he is. Yeah. So I'm not making any claims to the head. The story is in progress. Yeah.
Exactly. But the fact the classroom isn't achieving what there are systems that are meant to enforce that. And maybe that's what your friend needs to do, is go and talk to those people. But that is kind of amazing that in a system which does have its own sort of checks to make sure people are following risk assessments. And I was a school governor until basically must have been about April. I stood down because I was now living 150 miles from the school and felt I couldn't support it. They were taking this very seriously, one-way systems, everything, because the staff had concerns. The staff had people who they needed to protect. And it kind of surprised me that one teacher could be so ignorant of the feelings of their colleagues. It's emotionally ignorant, even if it's, even if they turn out to be right.
Yeah,
it's a long shot.
I think I get what you're saying as well. It's like, it's hard to believe that he's isolated, like in that school, and that's just him, and he's just this one rogue element that's not following those guidelines. So obviously investigating it further. Actually, the one good thing, Matt, I got out of that tweet is lots of people gave very specific advice on how they should further it up the chain, which is really, really handy, including government. I'm frustrated because I'm not the parent involved. When I've been the parent involved in similar things, I went I went to the MP, and we ended up getting the MP down to the school to fix stuff. So I'm that kind of parent. But
that's a pretty remarkable thing. What I'm finding is where the way we've done it over here is that, like, my child goes to school like one day a week. She's in a pod with a small number of other kids.
Wow.
They're in one room with one teacher. There's no mixing among the pods or anything else like that. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, so far, there hasn't been a lot. There have been very few cases that have been reported. But I actually wanted to ask Dr. Holding about something sort of tangentially related to that, which is I was reading recently that a large number of cases are due to a very, very small number of people, like what they were calling as super spreaders. And I was wondering what your opinion of the science is on that, like how supported it is right now, if you have read enough to have an opinion, and if that is indeed a thing, like how that might play into the school dynamic. Like, there's a very low risk, but it's a very bad thing if it does happen, because a lot of people will get sick very rapidly. Is that sort of how you think it might play out?
Yeah, so the idea of a super spreader is something I have come across, and I think there may be a really clear definition somewhere, but I keep seeing it used in slightly different ways by slightly different people. But this idea that one person then causes a lot of other people to get infected, and I think it fits with the idea that some people have different symptoms, some people ignore the guidance, and that's where I find the confusion. Some people seem to suggest it's someone who might run a church and is leading a congregation and coughing over all of them, and some other people suggest it's just somebody who just spreads virus because they have a higher level of infection. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense that there are going to be people who are these big conduits in society, whether it's social or biological, and they're putting a large number of people at risk. And we're talking about something that has exponential growth. So as soon as we get these surges, it goes fast.
Yeah.
Steve, want to say something?
Just looking in the chat room there, Callum, I think now there is somewhat a push to accept some infection if the benefit is for children's education. That's where the confusion comes from. It's obviously obvious that children will spread it. I don't entirely disagree with that. That education, education has to appear somewhere on that scales of importance. I get that. My objection is we were told specifically that, like, no, children don't spread it, and opening schools won't spread it. And I've never been convinced by that. If we want to turn around and go, oh no, we always said it was going to spread it, that will annoy me because that is not what was being said at the time.
And I remember being on this show and saying quite early on, one of the key issues with shutting schools is you shut down a whole load of child protection. And you can find, if you go back to when we have the school shuts, the head teachers were going and knocking on doors to find where children would, because they literally disappear. The parents stop engaging. They know that home has challenges on varying levels, and they literally knock on doors and say, "Can I see the child? Can I see they're still here?" Because there are those risks. And as being a school governor, one of the things I did unfortunately come across was discovering within a school of 400 something kids, there are always some really challenging things going on, and things which are really sad. And it was a great experience in the sense of what I learned about the world, but it's not something that makes idle chit chat. But yeah, there's always one or two kids who I would be desperately concerned about, but the support networks came from the school. They didn't just appear in society by themselves.
Dr. Holding, I know you want to talk about the school vouchers issue, the free school meals, and that's fine. Just trigger warning then. This is an emotive topic, and it makes people feel angry and stressed, me included. And you talk about the school support system. I was a child that grew up on free school meals, and we definitely danced on or below, or sometimes if we were lucky, just above that bread line. And it must have been a great comfort to my parents sometimes knowing that food was sorted during the week. Incredibly stressful to get to the point of the month where buying actual food is a stress, and you hear people going, "Well, it's the parents' responsibility to do this. I was down to my last farthing, and I prioritized that on food." You get that, but I honestly just think that is people who don't understand living in poverty. Like, you genuinely do get to the point where actual food to eat is an issue, and it happens in this country right under people's noses. So, I mean, that's me. I'm going to pause myself and take a breath, Matt, and let you come in.
Well, as someone who has worked in a school and has done a reasonable amount of reading about poverty and its effect on education and its further effect on people's ability to achieve later in life, it's amazing how many problems in our world would be solved if we just got rid of poverty.
Oh, we should just do that then.
Almost all of the schooling, almost all of the research that I've seen on schooling is all focused on closing the gap between people who are poor, kids who are poor, and kids who are middle class or upper middle class, or just flat out rich or even wealthy. So much time and energy and money is spent on it, and yet you'd think that if you solve the basic problem, poverty, then you could spend that time and energy figuring out how to make education. I mean, just think about how much better the world would be if we didn't have, I don't know, 20% plus kids here in the United States living in poverty, not necessarily getting all the food they need on a weekly basis. I mean, it's kind of a big thing, and the solutions are out there.
Look, I'm no hippie, Dr. Holding, but we've definitely done. So look, Matt, don't stress. That's a big drill going off in Matt's background. We're making do. Look, there's definitely enough food to feed all the kids in the country. Like, that's not controversial.
Yeah.
We've got enough money to make sure that every kid has got a full belly. It's the method that which people try to go about it. So people are getting angry at the government right now for having voted against continuing free school meals. Seems odd because, you know, Marcus Rashford, the footballer who campaigned before to get that extended, he's been rewarded with an MBE for his work, but it doesn't seem to have carried over to now this period. And I know you've got different views to me, so I think we can respectfully disagree here.
Well, I think I don't disagree that one option would be to give these kids food is better than not giving them anything. Okay, that's the first thing. But what I found quite difficult is someone who was brought up fairly middle class under Thatcher. The way you're brought up when you're young is the idea that if you work hard, that you don't have these problems, which I now know is complete rubbish.
Yeah.
It's a lie, you know. But what I did get taught as I've grown, it's something is that, you know, the sort of things you get from the people who would have promoted views of Thatcher and the like of that, which I was growing up under, was like, you can't give these people money because they don't know how to spend it. You need to give them food vouchers and tell them what to do. And I had to sort of learn I have learned and I have appreciated now that I believe actually those things actually keep people in poverty. You need to support these people. And therefore, what I've been disagreeing with people is people say, oh, we should definitely give vouchers. But these are the same people who taught me that we shouldn't give vouchers because they keep you in poverty. What I feel we should do is just give these people money, literally, because you know what? It might be this person is great at growing veg in their own garden. Actually, they are okay on food, but their washing machine's broken. So now we have food vouchers. What are they going to... And yeah, I completely agree. School meals in school, absolutely, because you need to sit down. Giving those for free, brilliant, it works. When we're talking about kids outside school, giving people control of their own money, and it seems to become a debate of you either give school meals or you give nothing. And I'm saying actually, they haven't voted for free meals, fine, but actually we should be saying give these people cash, and it costs less to administer. It helps people do what they want, and I just feel like it's almost the fact because they said no to school meals, we've taken a step back.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the counter argument, and if my mother's listening, I apologise. The counter argument is none of my free school meals at school could be spent on alcohol or cigarettes. That's the counter argument.
And I know, and that's why I think in the school setting it makes sense because you need to sit. You're going to have to sit down in a room at school, and then you at least there's no putting a meal in front of you at school at the time for a meal in front of you. I don't think it is debatable. I think when you're talking about what we're now talking about is over the holidays when people are at home. Yeah, there are people who will go and spend on cigarettes, but that's what I was brought up being taught. And
but it is sometimes true. It is sometimes true, though.
People says it is sometimes true, but for a lot of people, it isn't. And what you're doing is you're punishing everyone due to your stereotypes. And those people, and I have worked in Tesco's, I have worked in these stores, who want to spend food vouchers on cigarettes. I saw them selling them for half their face value to someone else to get them cigarettes. Yeah. I saw them trying to pass through the till. I saw them getting abuse at staff who wouldn't accept them. The people who will do that find a way.
Matt wants to come in, but there's drilling in the background. Go for it, Matt. Just shout over the drilling.
All right, I'll go for it. What I would suggest, and I think is the thing to consider here, is that there's a wealth of research now from economists who have studied, and there've been pilot studies, studied giving people money to say, here's some money, don't starve to death. And generally speaking, it's cheaper and works out better. I think the issue you're going to have is no matter what system you employ.
Yeah, sorry.
There will always be, I know, the drill is madness, isn't it?
Yeah.
No matter what system you employ, there will always be those who engage in self-destructive behavior. The good thing about free school meals is you're sure the kids are eating when they're there.
Yeah.
So even if the parents are self-destructive and can't manage themselves, you still know that kids are being taken care of to a certain extent.
I would love to know the science of that. I would love, not that you're not an expert in this, Dr. Holding, but we might be coming up against our limits of expertise. My views of it may well have been jaded by seeing that stereotype up front and in a very kind of small sample size. So I would be interested to see. But I mean, you're basically pushing for a kind of universal wage almost, aren't you? That's...
Yeah, I mean, it's where you end up. But actually, to be honest, all I'm pushing for is that benefits when you're poor we just give people more money because I don't think we give them enough. They shouldn't be poor. Which I'm just saying we need to do more. And all you're doing by these ideas of controlling and restricting what people get is, and it is what Matt's saying, and it's what I have read and what I have built up to change my views over my life, say that this is not the way to fix it. And actually, that's what I find probably shocking the most, is I came from a certain background. I had to challenge my views that I was brought up with. I have read the evidence. And now the people who taught me all that suddenly seem to have flipped and have forgotten all that evidence. And that's what I'm finding really, really weird right now.
What I find interesting is the same people who will complain regarding their, let's just say guns, for example, being taken away and their freedoms in the nanny state are the same ones who want to inflict an incredible nanny state on people who need benefits for whatever reason.
We should eat the rich. That's what we should do.
Yep.
Eat
can
the
all
rich.
agree on that.
That is a reference from a TV show. That's not my actual opinion. Let's end the show by talking about one of me and Dr. Holding's great passions, what we first really bonded over, and what I would say is the closest thing I have to a religion, and that is skepticism with a K and the skeptical movement. And I'm not sure there's many people, I don't know how many people are aware of there being a skeptical movement. And, it's just... It's spreading critical thinking and using logic, dismantling, for me, the bits that stick out about the skeptical movement are dismantling bad arguments for things that are simply not true, but are able to grab large proportions of the people with seemingly reasonable arguments. How do we deconstruct somebody saying acupuncture, well, I've got a really great story about how acupuncture healed me. I had all this pain. Then I had acupuncture. Then I got better. How do you deny that? You can't. You can't deny my story, so therefore acupuncture works. And there's so many great things. There's so many great examples of that. Homeopathy cured my horse, and horses don't know. Horses don't know about placebo. So how can homeopathy cure my horse? Checkmate, skeptic. But skepticism is about breaking down those arguments logically, understanding, it's an exploration into human understanding and how we consume the world and how we make our decisions. Like you're basically, to my mind, my personal philosophy is you're free to believe anything you like until that crisscrosses my world. So until you are actively harming other people around you, you can pretty much go off and do whatever you want. But if you're going to push and promote an alternative medicine, for example, which I know me and Dr. Holding talk about a lot, to the point where you would want someone to stop taking real medicine, I'm going to call it real medicine, then you're causing harm. And that's where the skeptical movement wants to step in. And it's not just that, it's for matters of things like ghost hunting and just general critical thinking. I have seen up firsthand my father being told to come off of cancer treatment by a supposed friend and told that really, obviously, chemotherapy is just a big con, isn't it? It's just a big con, Dr. Holding, and that they should take honey. And it was all about honey and stuff like that. And that's where we can cause real harm. And I know both you and I are very passionate about the skeptical movement, and I've waffled on and on there, but to say that the skeptical movement has lost a great figure within them, which is the great... the great Randy. And, I'll let you say things now.
Yeah. So I guess did you go to the Amazing Meeting when it was last on in London with Randy?
The Amazing Randy. Has he got a second name? He always just goes by the Amazing Randy.
I think he's James Randy, isn't he?
James Randy, yeah. The Amazing
James
James
Randy.
Randy.
Good I got that right. But,
Sorry.
I think Randy, the story that stuck with me that he told at the Amazing Meeting was this one that was an example of a family who saved up all their money to go to a faith healer. And of course, they turned up, he did the show, I think even put the kid on stage, did his thing, and the kid could walk, again, kind of thing. But it was all an illusion. And when the kid walked out, of course, he wasn't healed, and they burnt all their money. And what he did as a magician was show that these things were scams. They were magic tricks, effectively, though you never call them that. And it made him very angry. And I remember that stuck with me, this idea that someone could make a living out of, using all their abilities just to con people out of a lifetime savings to save lives. And it's horrific. And that's the far end. And then you get to the sort of the stuff you're talking about, boot selling, homeopathy. Yeah. Well, that's just profiteering out of something they know doesn't work.
Yeah, there is no way people putting together homeopathy and companies aren't aware that it's literally nothing. It can't possibly do anything. Like that's speculation. I want dodgy ground here. I feel like it would. I feel like they would know. It feels like they would know. I tell you what, you use the word scam. It feels like things like that are a scam. That's how it feels to me. Like homeopathy is a scam. It's preying on people misunderstanding a thing that they probably know to be not true.
I mean, you take an individual, a person. Let's say there's a person at the end of my road who runs a shop selling homeopathy. There's a good chance they're a true believer. Taking a company like Boots, there's a good chance that people working in that chain of production believe it.
Mm-hmm.
What I struggle to understand is how a company which is accountable to the public on that scale have very recently, I don't actually know what their current policy is on homeopathy, but last time I checked, they were selling it.
Yeah.
They have had national protests against the fact they sell it. The science is clear. So institutionally, if we ignore the individuals, there is enough evidence that they should know what they're doing as an institution.
I took part in a mass homeopathy overdose where like there's a whole room full of people and we all downed like a whole bottle of arsenic homeopathy treatments. It was just to raise awareness of it. You know, there's holes in the logic there too. But yeah, this is the kind of movement. Like Josh Covey in our chat room has just said, on a recommendation from us to listen to The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, which is like the Big Papa podcast of skepticism. It's the biggest one. They're amazing. He said he nearly cried because he'd found his people and just people kind of speaking sense. But all of that organization kind of filtered down from Randy, you know, with these kind of skeptical groups popping up mostly in America and then spreading out to the UK. And then in the UK, you know, we've got wonderful groups like the Merseyside Skeptics. We've got Skeptics in the Pub, which you were a big part of in the Cambridgeshire branch. And then I go off to, I can't believe I go to this convention all the time. What's the one in Manchester called? QED. QED. Yeah, I go off to a QED and I say to my wife, you know, right, I'm off to go and hang out with a bunch of geeks from the internet listening to science and skepticism lectures and stuff. And so I don't normally get like, I don't get teary or about a celebrity passing away or especially an elderly celebrity, but you know, close to our movement, I think it was just worth marking, you know, what he'd achieved and what he'd kicked off and started. Matt.
Well, it's interesting that you would bring up Randy of all people because he exposed Uri Geller when I was still a child.
Yeah,
and it has had a profound impact on how I looked at things like that from that moment forward.
They are timing it. They're waiting for you to speak, and then and then they're piling on. It just sounds even funnier with the noise gate because we just hear a at the end of each of your words. And I'm really missing my little community because QED was cancelled, and that was like my breakaway to go and speak to a bunch of like-minded people. And it is one of the beauties of the internet with all the rubbish that social media churns up. You can go and find your tribe online, at least, Dr. Holding.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's, you know, I think just actually one thing I liked about James Randi is everything I came across, I felt that he was going for the right targets. He was going for people like Uri Geller who make a huge amount of money. And I think when we talk about how you fight anti-science, how you fight homeopaths to save lives, there is a right way and a right target. And I think, you know, sometimes people feel there's a lack of compassion. I never felt that with Randy. Maybe some people are going to criticize me later, but I always felt he was going after the big guns with the big players. And I think one thing that's probably put people off these kind of skeptical movements is there are people like, I'll say it, Richard Dawkins. He will now on Twitter go after individuals from a massive sense of privilege, which I don't think achieves anything. I think, you know, there's a way to do this and there's a way to change minds. And it isn't going after people and humiliating them. It's going after people who are absolutely driving this false information for personal gain. And then, you know, people who, and, you know, going back to cancer, there are people who with cancer, I don't believe hounding them is right from either side. I feel the complementary medicine stuff goes from misguided to downright evil. But I also don't feel me as a cancer researcher need to walk into people and hammer it in the face that I know better than them. What we need to do is make a world and a society where they're protected from the people who come up with these bogus ideas and give them faith and trust in the relationships they build with their clinicians. And I'm not that person. I'm a person who wants to make it that people realize that actually there is a person to go and talk to, and it's not your Auntie Agnes.
Yeah.
And you know, and those people, some of them mean well, but you change the structures, you don't make it personal. And you know, in the skeptics community, there was a thing not that long ago, which was don't be a dick. And I think that is something that we really need to also focus on. And to me, James Randi was one of those people who, as you go, he went after people like Uri Geller, who has a bank balance, he can take it.
Yeah. It's yeah. Make sure you're punching up, I think, is a good general rule as well, isn't it? Early on, Matt, in the forums, in the alternative forums, you start learning about critical thinking, and then you think you can take the whole world on. You know, I used to dive into Yahoo Answers and be like, it's my personal mission to convert each and every single person who thinks that the chiropractic is real. It's not real and it can't hurt you. But yeah, you have to tone that down, and you have to go. You can't rule the world with that one tool that you've got. You know, I kept seeing nails everywhere, and as Andrew says, was a bit of a.
I mean, and I think you learned from that, and you went through that experience, and there's some people who I think haven't.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I mean, for me, I like the Uri Geller example very much because at a certain level, you're targeting people who are taking advantage of other people. And if you go to someone who's been convinced to drop their cancer therapy, you're talking to someone who is a victim.
Yeah.
What you want to go after is the profit maker, the person who is profiting by taking advantage of that person and making them a victim. And I think, as you discovered, it's very easy to target the wrong people, especially when you're starting out.
All right, I think the drill is telling us that we've had our time. Come in, boat number 8. Your time is up. Oh, we've tackled a few heavy subjects there. I hope it's been interesting and engaging, and that we haven't triggered too many people. Yeah, I mean, we touched a lot of my hot topics today. It's your fault, Dr. Holding. It's because you and me. I don't think we should sit there on WhatsApp once we've had wine, sitting there going, and another thing. We're just winding each other up.
We didn't even get on house prices.
No, we didn't. Let's get you back on very soon because, man, house prices are killing me right now. And it's baffling, and I wish I knew how to cut through all the jargon and rubbish from... I don't know if I said this. Did I say on the show, Matt, that a estate agent had come round, valued the house at one price, and it was obvious that he wanted... I might have said last week. Really obvious that he wanted just a quick sale. And then the next time a local guy came round, said, you know, we'd take a more patient approach, and the difference was £30,000. It was over £30,000. I think I did mention it last week, but I'm still in shock.
Because I know I've got a story.
Go on then, let's have it.
Estate agent, at least one listening, and this is what's been driving me up the wall this week. We're looking at a property in York. It's got like a driveway that goes under it to a house behind it. That's fine. We think, having finally gone back and forth through about 500 emails, that this house comes with the garage behind it. The estate agent doesn't know. The solicitor keeps failing to answer the questions directly of the seller. And we've now come on, and we've literally got, oh yes, the property has access to this garage. And we're like, could you just confirm which of the 3 properties which are using this drive you actually mean?
Yeah.
But the way the guy who's selling it said, oh yeah, and you can park in the garage as a flippant remark. And now it's taken us endless email, and you go, shouldn't an estate agent actually know what they're selling? And I know you've got some estate agents in the chat, and I would like to know what they feel about these people who don't even know what the property is. So catch me on Twitter or something later in filming, because I feel some people just don't even know what they're selling. They just want the money and don't have a clue.
Yeah, obviously these are challenging times for estate agents, and they're under a few more restrictions. But clearly that first guy who came, he was just like, I don't fancy the 10-mile trip up here to keep doing showings. I want to get this out the door. He's like, you could sell it at this price tomorrow. Whoa, gifted the guy. And I was like, but I've said I don't want to sell it tomorrow. I want the best possible price I can get. You know, so maybe I explained it better to this second guy, and I was like, look, we can only move to an equal value or less house. Therefore, we can be patient. We can afford to say no. We've got no deadlines. And we've not even really started the proper house buying, process in earnest.
But I think knowing where the garage for the property is a small detail that people should pay attention to. That's all I'm saying.
And Matt was saying
it
about
hasn't been the only thing.
Yeah. Well, I was saying Matt's saying the kids get a vote now, and they do. The kids get a vote. The kids are insisting on garden space enough to have a greenhouse to properly grow stuff. I'm like, all right, nerds, fine. So now that's on the Venn diagram of things.
Good luck.
See if Matt's going to risk an unmute.
Yes, it seems that the vacuuming has stopped for the moment. I'm now waiting. Tick tock, any second.
Quick,
as
get your
soon as I
point
get to
out.
making an actual point.
Okay, good. Do you know what? That'll do us. Let's get out of here. If you're a patron to Missed Apex podcast, we'll do a patron-only stream probably tomorrow, sometime after free practice for the Portuguese Grand Prix. Then we'll have our race review on the Sunday at 8 p.m. as normal. Where else can you catch us? Well, Remain Indoors will be back here next Thursday. We'll try and get Dr. Holding back very soon because we've got tons of stuff that I wanted to yell about with him on here. Will be angry men yelling at clouds, Dr. Holding. People were asking for Liam. Liam did ask me to be on this one. He said he was free, and I completely forgot. But this has reminded me to get in touch with him. Another place you can catch me is I'm doing a little podcast with music. So I've been Spanner's 90s Radio. It's only on Spotify Premium. So if you're the family that has the subscription to Spotify, instead of like Google Play or Amazon Music, if you're on Spotify, you can get our podcast there, Spanner's 90s Radio, and it's just me chatting, very radio styly, and there's and then there's 90s tunes, and you can request yours. There's a little link there, and it takes you straight to a little voice note where you can just talk to me and say, can you please play, Bye Bye Blackbird? And I go, no, that's not from the 90s. But search for Spanner's 90s Radio if you're a Spotify customer. Dr. Andrew Holding is at Andrew Holding on Twitter.
Yep.
There we go. Matt Trumpets is at MattPT55. MattPT55. You can email Matt as well. He always likes emails from you guys. We love hearing from you guys. MattPT55 at gmail.com.
That's the one.
You can message me anytime to spanners at gmail. No, I'm not big enough to get that email. Spannersready at gmail.com. Follow me at spannersready on Twitter too. Well, until we see you next, out of all those shows that you can pick from, this might be a bit too much Spanners these days. That's what they'll start yelling. Don't start any more shows, Spanners, for goodness sake. Well, fine. Do me one favour though. Work hard, be kind, and have fun, and remain indoors.